Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline from KnittingHouseSquare, and today I have another brioche knitting tutorial for you. So if you've noticed from some of my previous knitting videos here that I've been really into brioche recently. So today's video is going to be a 2-color brioche infinity scarf. And I'm releasing this video kind of in celebration of my new Skillshare video. So I have a new Skillshare video teaching you the basics of brioche. In the Skillshare class, I take you through everything you need to know to create your first brioche project. So we start with the basics of brioche, where we learn the 1-color Italian cast on. Then we work the setup and repeat rows to create a flat sample. Next, we take our brioche to the next level, and we work brioche in the round. So this is a 1-color brioche in the round, and we learn the modifications that need to be made to switch from flat brioche to in the round brioche. Lastly, we put all the tools we've learned together to create our class project, which for this course is an infinity scarf. And you can knit this one flat or in the round. It's completely up to you. This project makes the perfect quick knit because of the bulky weight yarn, and it also makes the perfect gift around the holidays and winter. Overall, this class teaches you everything you need to know to create your first brioche project. So if you're interested in checking out my new Skillshare class, check down below in the description box. If you use my link down below, you can get a free trial membership. That way you can view the class completely for free. So if you're interested, check down below for that. So in today's video, I've taken that kind of one step further and made a bit more of an advanced video for here on YouTube. So this one is going to be a 2-color brioche infinity scarf. So this one is knit flat. We're going to work a 2-color Italian cast on. Then we're gonna work our brioche stitch for whatever length you'd like for your infinity scarf. I decided to do a double loop infinity scarf. So you can see here, it goes around twice and it fits perfectly for me. So once we're all done, we're gonna cast off, and then I'm gonna show you how to create a seamless edge so you really don't see where the seam is in the scarf. So actually in mine, you can see there's a bit of a color change right there, but you don't actually see a big bulky seam. So I'm going to show you the trick to making one of those. So down in the description box below, you're going to find a few things. So first, you're going to find each one of the video breakpoints. That way, if you want to fast forward or rewind any specific part of the video, all the timestamps are down below. You're also going to find the full written version of this pattern. That way, you can take the pattern that I've created, and if you'd like to, you can make it customizable to you. So you can change the width or the length or really anything you'd like about it. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that red subscribe button. Let's get started. The first thing you need to make this project is a size US 5 circular knitting needle. Now to do a 2-color brioche knit flat, you do need a circular knitting needle. You cannot use straight knitting needles. But the nice thing is the length of the cord doesn't matter, so you can use any length cord. You're gonna need 1 tapestry needle, a pair of scissors, and then lastly, you need 2 colorways of worsted weight yarn. So for me, I used 275 yards of my main colorway, and then 250 yards of my background colorway. Let me tell you a little bit more about the yarn I'm using here. So here I have my 2 colors, and they're both worsted weight. First up, I have a solid color yarn. This is gonna be kind of like the background color that I'm using. And then I have a self-striping yarn. So if you didn't want to use a self-striping yarn, because they do tend to be a little bit pricier for self-striping, what you could also do is you could just buy like 3 or 4 colors going in a gradient of 1 yarn base, and then just switch throughout the infinity scarf. So that would give you a really similar look. So first, starting out over here with my solid color. So it shows up a little bit more green in person. I feel like on camera it looks a little bit more blue. This one is Plymouth Yarns, the Worsted Merino Superwash, 100% Superwash Fine Merino Wool. This one is colorway number 43. It says that one is called Green Lake. And this one recommends a size US 7 knitting needle. Next up, I have one of my favorite self-striping yarns here. This one is Noro, and this is the Akari base. So I'll put the name of the yarn right there on the screen. So it looks like it's color number 4. A lot of times they do numbers instead. And what I like about Noro yarns is that they do a lot of different, like a really nice blend of different bases all together, and it creates a really nice texture. So this skein has 480 meters on it, or 200 grams. And let's see, it recommends between a 6 to an 8 knitting needle. So they both recommend just about the same size knitting needle, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Once you've gathered all your supplies, you're ready to get started. So let's start with the cast on. So now to start out, all I have in front of me is going to be my knitting needle and my 2 colors of yarn. And the first thing I need to do is I need to create a slip knot. And when I create the slip knot, I need to be holding both of the strands of yarn together. Now in this video, I am going to be doing the 2 color Italian cast on. And I do have a whole video just for that cast on. So if you're curious just to see more about this cast on, I'll link that one up above in the corner. So first I'm going to take the 2 strands and just lay them over my hand. I leave about 8 inches or so there just to weave in later on. Again, I have both of the strands of working yarn coming out up over the top. Tail is closest to me. I'm just going to take these 2 strands, go back behind my finger, down below to the bottom, up the front again to the top, back behind down to the bottom, up the front to the top again, back below to the bottom, grab on with those strands as well. Now to create the slip knot, I just need to rearrange these strands on my finger. So I'm going to take the second set of strands, move them up over that first set. Now I'm going to take that new second set, move those up over the first set. Now I'm going to take that new second set and slide them off my finger. So now I've created a little slip knot. So I'm just going to take this slip knot, take my knitting needle, and just slide it right on. Gently tighten it onto there. So this cast on is a little bit different in that this slip knot doesn't actually count as a stitch. So this doesn't count, it's purely just holding it on our knitting needle. So now that we have the slip knot on the knitting needle, the next thing we need to decide is which color do we want to be on the outer edge. So the way this pattern is set up, there's going to be knit stitches on either side and then the regular brioche in the center. So you can either choose either color to end up being those knit stitches on the outside. For mine, I'm going to choose the self-striping colorway as those outer stitches. So I'm going to put the self-striping colorway further away from me and then have the solid color yarn closest to me. And now when I hold my knitting needle too, I just want to untwist the yarns so that the self-striping one, or whichever one you want to be on the outside, is further away. The other one is closest to you. And then I just like to grab onto those tails with my right hand just so they stay out of the way. And then I grab onto the slip knot with my pointer finger so that that one doesn't slip off. And again, this slip knot doesn't count as a stitch. This one is purely just there to hold the yarn in place. Later on, we'll take out this slip knot and we don't need it. So to start, what we want to do is we want to grab both strands with our left hand. So I'm just going to grab it with my bottom 3 fingers. Then I want to push away from myself on the colorway that you want on the outer edge. Push towards myself with my thumb on the other colorway. So we're creating the same diamond shape that you see with the long tail cast on or the German twisted cast on. Now what we're going to do is we're going to alternate between casting on knit stitches and purl stitches. And we want knit stitches on the outer edges, so we're going to start with the knit stitch. So I start each one of these stitches with my knitting needle above this diamond and it pointed in towards the center. Now when I actually begin moving my knitting needle, first we're doing a knit stitch. So we're going to go towards ourself, down the front, come down below, up the center, away from ourselves, back behind that back strand, down below to the bottom, go underneath both of the strands towards ourselves, and end up back in that top center position. So now you can see we've cast on 1 stitch, and the stitch is going to be the colorway that you want on the outer edge. Next up, we're going to do a purl stitch. So to do a purl stitch, again, we're starting out in that top center position. We're going to go up over, then down below the back, underneath both of the strands towards ourselves, come up the front, down the center, underneath that back strand, up to the top again, and arrive back at that top center. So now we've cast on a second stitch, and that one is in our second colorway there. Now we just need to continue alternating between those two stitches. So I'll show them again here. So for the knit stitch, we're gonna go towards ourselves, in front of that solid color yarn there, down below to the bottom, up the center, away from ourselves, back behind that back strand, underneath both of the strands towards ourselves, arrive back at that top center. Now the purl stitch, away from ourselves, down below both of the strands, towards ourselves. Now I'm going to go down the center, below that back strand, up the back, towards ourselves. Arrive back at that top center. So I do also have a full written version of these instructions. So if you're curious about that one, I'll link it down below because sometimes I find it's a little bit easier for me to follow the written version of cast-ons. So that is linked down below. So now I'm going to continue casting on all the way across this edge until I need to cast on one more stitch. Then I'll come back and show you the trick for that last stitch. Okay, so now I've finished casting on all those stitches along that edge. And as I'm casting on too, I'm making sure not to twist the stitches too much and just keep all those cast on bumps going in the same direction. So now I need to do that final stitch. So to do that, I'm gonna rotate my hands clockwise there, just about 180 degrees. So I'm switching the thumb and the pointer finger locations. Now I'm gonna drop both these strands. I'm going to take whichever colorway I want to be on the outer edge. I'm going to put my thumb to the left side of that strand. Now take my thumb back behind to the right, towards myself, kind of creating a full loop there. Now I'm going to slide that loop off my thumb and onto my knitting needle. So we basically just do a little backward loop cast on there for the last stitch, and that prevents anything from unraveling there at the edge. So now that we've worked the cast on, we're all ready to turn our work and begin the setup row. So now I've turned my work and I'm all ready to begin the setup row. So when we work the setup row, we have the wrong side of our work facing us. So we have the tail over here towards the left and the working yarn over here on the right. So for the setup row and every brioche row that follows, we have to work across the row first in our first colorway, which is whatever we have as those edge stitches, and then second as whatever the second colorway is, so whatever that next stitch color in is. So I'm going to begin with my edge colorway, which for me is the self-striping yarn. So first I'm going to purl the first stitch. Then I need to work a slip one, so I'm going to slip the next stitch purlwise, which is in the solid color yarn. Then I'm going to work a yarn over, so just going to bring my yarn up over to the back, in between the two knitting needles to the front again. Now I'm going to purl the next stitch, slip the next stitch, work a yarn over, purl one, slip one, yarn over. And I'm just going to continue this all the way across. Purl one, slip one, yarn over. Now I finish with that final purl stitch. And now I'm just going to slide that slip knot right off my knitting needle. So I just leave it hanging there until the very end. So now that I've finished going across in the first colorway, I'm going to grab onto all my stitches and I'm going to pull on my knitting needle so that all those stitches end up back on the opposite point again. So now when I look at my work again, I still have the tail coming out down here on the left, And I only have one color working yarn over here on the right, but it's whatever my second colorway is there. So now for this setup row in the second color, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna slip the first stitch purlwise, then we're gonna work what's called a brioche knit. So first, let me slip that first stitch. So just slipping that one purlwise. Then I need to get my yarn to the back, so I'm gonna take my yarn in between my two knitting needles to the back of my work. And next up we have this brioche knit here. It's often written as a bark one or a BRK one. So what that means is you want to knit together that yarn over that you worked in the previous color together with the stitch that's right below it. So I'm just going to knit these two together, and that's a brioche knit. Now I have a repeat I want to continue across the rest of this row. So I'm going to bring my yarn to the front in between my two knitting needles. I'm going to slip the next stitch purlwise. Then I'm going to work another brioche knit. So you can see here we have another stitch with the yarn over right on top of it. I'm going to knit those two together. Now I'm going to bring my yarn to the front, slip the next stitch purlwise, work a brioche knit. And I'm going to continue this all the way across. Bring my yarn to the front, slip the next stitch purlwise, work a brioche knit. And for the final stitch, I'm just gonna slip that stitch from my left to my right knitting needle purlwise. So now that we've worked across that setup row with both colors, what we can now do is we can turn our work. So anytime we finish working a row in both colorways, then we turn our work. If we're just switching between the two colorways within a row, we slide the work from one knitting needle to the other. So that's an important distinction to remember. So now when we turn our work, and we know we have the right side facing us now because we can see we have our tail down here in the bottom right hand corner and both of our strands of working yarn down here in the bottom right hand corner of our work. Nothing over here in the bottom left hand corner. Now we can work the first brioche repeat row in each of the colors. So again, I'm gonna begin this row with whatever color I have on the outer edge. So for me, that's the self-striping colorway. So to begin, I'm gonna knit the first stitch. After the first knit, then our repeat begins. So I'm gonna bring my yarn to the front in between my two knitting needles. I'm gonna slip my next stitch purlwise. Then I'm gonna work a brioche knit. Now again, I'm gonna begin the repeat again. So I'm gonna bring my yarn in between my two knitting needles to the front, slip the next stitch purlwise, work a brioche knit. And I'm gonna continue this all the way across until 2 stitches remain. Now with these final 2 stitches, again, I'm gonna bring my yarn in between my two knitting needles to the front. I'm gonna slip the next stitch purlwise, and now I'm gonna knit that final stitch. So now I've worked across that first row in my first colorway. So now I need to slide my work over to the right so I can begin working this in the second colorway. So now here in the second colorway, first I'm gonna slip the first stitch purlwise. Now I'm gonna work what's called a brioche purl. So similarly to the brioche knit where we knit 2 together, here we're just gonna purl 2 together. And again, you can see that yarn over and that stitch are right on top of each other. So my yarn is already in the front here. So I'm just gonna pick it right up and purl those 2 together. Now I need to work a slip 1 and a yarn over. Again, brioche purl, so purl the yarn over and the stitch together. slip a stitch purlwise, wrap my yarn around to create the yarn over. Repeat all the way across until 2 stitches remain. So now with these final 2 stitches remaining, or really you can kind of think of it as 3 stitches because we do also have that yarn over in there, I'm going to work the brioche purl, and then I'm going to slip that final stitch. So now that both of our working yarns are over here on the left-hand side, we know we're ready to turn our work. So now when we turn our work, we're going to be on the wrong side of our work, or the back side of our work. And now we're ready to begin the second set of a repeat. And now we're ready to begin the second repeat row. So again, we're going to start with a color that's on the furthest outer edge. So over here, it's going to be my self-striping yarn. I'm going to purl the first stitch. Then I'm going to work slip 1, yarn over, brioche purl. Repeat across. Slip 1, yarn over, brioche purl. Slip 1, yarn over, brioche purl. All the way across until 2 stitches remain. Now for the final 2 stitches, I'm just going to do the slip 1 purlwise, yarn over, and purl the final stitch. Now I need to work this second row in the second color, so I'm going to slide my work over to the other knitting needle point. And now in this colorway, first I'm going to slip my first stitch purlwise. Then I'm going to work a brioche knit. So work the stitch and the yarn over together. Bring my yarn to the front, slip 1 purlwise. And repeat that again. So I'm going to work a brioche knit, bring my yarn to the front, slip 1 purlwise. All the way across until 2 stitches remain. Now to finish it off, I'm going to finish with the brioche knit and then slip the final stitch. So that is all there is to the 2 brioche rows. Now what I would recommend doing is I would work up just about 1.5 inches or so. So here's some different colorways here. And once you work up about 1.5 inches, what I would do is I would check your tension. So I would check, do you like the kind of squishiness of the material? Do you think it could be a little bit tighter or a little bit looser? And then depending on that, I would either keep the same knitting needle size, or I would begin again in a smaller or larger knitting needle size. Because you want to make sure you do that before you get too far into the work. But you also don't want to do it right at the very beginning because it takes a few rows or a few repeats before you can see the real texture of your work. So that is one thing I'd recommend doing. So now we're going to continue repeating those 2 repeat rows over and over again until our total length reaches 56 inches. Now if you want to, you can add or subtract a little bit of length. The length is really up to you. So I'll come back and show you next how to cast off and seam the 2 pieces together. Also, if you aren't using the self-striping yarn and instead you're using the different colorways, all I would do is I would take that 60 inches and divide it by the number of colorways you're using. So let's say you're using 3 colorways. I would just do 20 inches in each colorway. That way you can get that same ombre or multicolor effect. So I've now finished repeating the pattern over and over again until I reached my desired length. And basically the way I determined if it was a length that I liked is I just tried this one on. So the nice thing about knitting it flat rather than in the round is you can test it out to see if you want it any longer or shorter. So I stopped at 56 inches because I found that was a really good length for me. And then it will also grow a bit once I wash it. So once it grows a bit, I feel like it'll be really pretty perfect. So now I'm all ready to cast off. And when I cast off, I want to have the wrong side of my work facing me. So I want to be about to work the wrong side of my work. And I know it's the wrong side again because I have this solid green facing up as the knit stitches. The right side of my work is where I have the knit stitches on the two outer edges, and then it's this self-striping yarn that's the main color. So to start, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work across this row as I normally would in my first colorway, which is the self-striping yarn. So I'm gonna purl the first stitch, slip one, yarn over, brioche purl. Slip one, yarn over, brioche purl, all the way across in this first colorway. Now I'm gonna hold on to my work and again slide it over the opposite knitting needle point so I can work my second color. And now this time, instead of working just the typical regular pattern all the way across, we're gonna cast off the top edge. So I'm gonna knit the first stitch. Then my second stitch over here is a brioche knit, so I'm gonna work a brioche knit. And now that I have two stitches over here on my right hand knitting needle, I'm gonna slide them both back over to my left hand knitting needle, and I'm gonna knit them together through the back loop. Now I'm gonna work the next stitch just as a regular knit stitch. I have two stitches again over here on the right, so I'm gonna slide them both back over to my left knitting needle. And now I'm gonna knit those two together through the back loop. Next up, I have a brioche knit, so I'm gonna work a brioche knit, pass them both back over, knit them together through the back. And I'm just gonna continue across. When it's a purl stitch in the opposite color, I'm just gonna work that as a regular knit stitch. Again, slide them both back through the back loop. And when it's a regular brioche knit, I'm just gonna work a brioche knit there, all the way across. Now once I only have that one final stitch remaining on my right hand knitting needle, I'm just gonna pull on my knitting needle so the loop becomes much larger. And now I'm gonna cut my yarn. So I wanna make sure that I leave enough yarn to seam with. So I always like to have extra, so I'm gonna leave about 2 feet of tail. Cut my yarn there. And then when I feed this tail through this remaining loop, I like to go so that the tail comes up through the center of that loop and then out the top. And then just gently pull on it to tighten it. Now again, I need to break my other color yarn and I'm gonna leave just about the same length there, so the 24 inches. So I'm gonna zoom out here just for a second to show you how to fold this to begin seaming. So when I fold mine, I basically put it in a long strip so that the right side of my work is facing down towards the table. So you can see the wrong side right now is facing up. And then I just take the two ends and I fold them in towards the middle. So right up along this edge is where we're gonna seam the two sides together. Now next, when I figure out how to actually position it so it's easiest to seam, what I want is I want my two yarn tails that I just worked with or across that cast off edge to be over on the right hand side. So I'm just gonna fold this a bit more so it becomes a little bit more compact here. But this looks perfect. So now up at the top of my little folded pile here, I have the two seams I'm working together. The right side of my work is facing up. And then I have my two cast off tails right over here on the right side of my work, because I like to seam from the right over towards the left. So now I just need to grab a tapestry needle. So I'm gonna seam across with my main color yarn or my self-striping color yarn here. So to start out, I'm just gonna go along and pick up these first two stitches on either side on the top and the bottom. These ones are the hardest to get like a clean edge on, so I just do the best I can on these two. So my working yarn comes out the bottom here, so I'm gonna go up into the top. I'm gonna pick up the bottommost knit stitch that I can see along that side column, put my tapestry needle through both loops of that knit stitch, pull the yarn through, then come back down here to the bottom, put my tapestry needle through both halves of the knit stitch down here, And again, pull the tapestry needle through. So now that we've done that first knit stitch, next up, what we have to do is we just have to carry this yarn through the second colorways portion, right? So we have these purl stitches in here. So we just kind of need this color yarn to fade into the background. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up the two bottommost loops right in here that are done in the second colorway. So I got those two bottommost ones. Now I'm gonna go down here to the opposite side. And again, I'm gonna pick up the two bottommost ones. They're a little easier to see on this side because they make up a V. So now next up, I wanna make sure I make this one a really nice clean one, right? Because these are gonna be the main ones that you see when you're looking at the scarf. So first I'm gonna take my tapestry needle through the rightmost loop on this bottom portion. Then I'm gonna go through the full knit stitch on the top portion, so both halves of the loop. Then I'm gonna come back down here to the bottom one, and I'm gonna go through the left portion of that knit stitch. So now we can see we just blended this full knit column all the way together, and you can't even tell where the seam would be in there. So now again, I just kind of need to hide the purl stitch again, hide this yarn within the purls. So I'm gonna pick up both halves right in here of the second colorway. Go. And then pick up both halves down here as well. And then I'm gonna do that same knit stitch thing again. So I'm gonna go from right to left under just the right side of that knit loop. Go up to the top, pick up both halves of the knit stitch up here. Then come back down here and go from right to left into the left half of that knit stitch. Now I'm just gonna continue doing that all the way across. So now I've finished going all the way across the seam in my first colorway yarn. So I just wanted to show you what it looked like real quick. So you can see all the knit stitches blend together really nicely, and it also closes up the gaps with the purl stitches really well. So this is the front side, and then on the back side you just get this really one nice clean seam down the center. And it's not bulky at all, it's a really thin cast off edge that we move to the inside of our work. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna weave in all the ends that I have. And then when I'm all done weaving in the ends, I'm gonna soak my project in some lukewarm water, then roll it up in a towel and lay it flat to dry. Then it'll be all ready to wear. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial today. As always, all the video time points are down below, as well as the PDF pattern. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that red subscribe button, that way you stay up to date on all my future videos. I'll see you next time.